Thank you, thank you, thank you. So today is one of those days where it's hard for me to know how to begin. As I sat in my office this week each day, and at times it felt like each hour, I felt my ability to hope go up and go down. Go up and go down. At first, I would hear that the hostage ceasefire deal was ready to be signed, and a few hours later, I would see that it was possibly going to fall apart. And as much as I've resisted the impulse to constantly read the news over the past year as part of my own attempt to preserve my mental health, over this past week, in my commitment to embrace hope, I felt like a moth drawn closer and closer to a campfire. I wanted to read that they were all coming home. I wanted to see the pictures of those hostages whose faces we've been staring at for 467 days being gently lifted into Israeli ambulances or helicopters or any other vehicle to know that they're coming home. I wanted to see it. And yet, each time that I stubbornly looked at the news, all I would see is the picture of politicians either touting themselves as the savior who brought and took responsibility for the ceasefire and the hostages coming home, or other politicians proudly standing firm on their principles, declaring why they couldn't allow the deal to go forward. There were more than a few occasions that I wanted to throttle them all and scream. And I don't have any relatives who are being held in the dungeons of hell or fighting in a war that forces our soldiers to kill innocent people in the process of eliminating the masked murderers of Hamas. Then, as the deal came closer and closer to a reality, I tried to understand a little of the mindset of those who were against the deal. How could you be against a deal to bring home our hostages? How could you look at yourself in the mirror knowing that you prevented these fellow Jews, these fellow humans, from coming home and saving the lives of our soldiers? And it was then, in the midst of that, that I heard the rumor that one of the terrorists set to be released in the exchange was a man who carried out the 2002 bombing of the Frank Sinatra cafeteria at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, which killed 9 people, including 2 friends of mine and Shauna's, Marla Bennett and Benjamin Blutstein. And I began looking for lists and names. And as I was doing this and searching, I was reminded how Yahya Sinwar, may his name be blotted out, the architect of October 7th, was released in a similar prisoner exchange. While I'll never falter in my absolute support of bringing all the hostages home, I also recognized how some were struggling with the realities of this deal. Even though the Talmud states that we must go to any length of expenditures to redeem captives, there's another Talmudic passage that says, and I quote, "One does not ransom captives for more than their value because of tikkun olam." Tikkun olam we think of as fixing the world, but in the Talmud, that's not how it's done. Tikkun olam is that we don't want to mess up the way the world is and screw things up. And if we start ransoming people for more than they're worth, whatever that means, all of a sudden we'll find that people are kidnapping Jews because they know they can make a buck. We'll encourage it. And it's here that I want to turn to a midrash on this week's parasha to possibly bring some insight into this moment. In this week's parasha, God appears to Moses from the flame arising from the bush that was not consumed, and God calls out from the bush, and the Torah tells us, "Vayar Adonai Kisar lirot v'yikra elav Elohim mitoch hasneh v'yomer Moshe Moshe v'yomer hineni. The first verse on your sheet says, when the Lord saw that he, Moses, had turned aside to look at the bush, God called to him out of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he answered, here I am. As you can see from the source in front of you, the two times that God says Moses has no break in between them. But other places in the Torah and the Tanakh where God calls out to somebody, so-and-so, so-and-so, there's a line that's put in there. Not in the way it's written in the Torah, but in any place where there is the scribal markings, specifically the trope markings. And so the rabbis noticed this. They had the trope markings, and they noticed this. After the critical moment, when Abraham is about to offer his son to God on the altar, the angel calls out. And if you look at the second place, Vayikra elav malach Hashem, and the angel, the messenger of God, called out to him from the heaven, Avraham, line, Avraham. Vayomer hineni. When God calls out to Jacob on his way down to Egypt to finally see his long-lost son, the Torah says, Vayomer Elohim leYisrael b'marot halayla Vayomer Yaakov, line, Yaakov, Vayomer hineni. There's a stop. Later on in the Tanakh, the same with Shmuel. The Lord came and stood there and he called out, Shmuel, Shmuel, with a line. Vayomer Shmuel, daver ki shema avdecha. Speak, for your servant is listening. And the Midrash asks, why is there no line between Moses? Why is this so? The Midrash says this is analogous to a person who placed upon himself a great burden and calls so-and-so, so-and-so, my dear, unload this burden from me. This is theologically daring of the Midrash to say that the weight was on God's shoulders and God barely could stand, as it were, in the metaphor, the weight of the Israelites in slavery. God couldn't handle it. And God was desperate for Moses to relieve the pressure from God's own shoulders. There's no time to spare, says God. I need the weight placed on my shoulders of the suffering of the Israelites to be relieved, and you are the one to do it. When innocent people are suffering, there's not a second to wait. Even the pause in the Torah, separating the repetition of the name, was too much of a break, too much of a pause. But there's more. About 6 months into the war, somebody asked me, Rabbi, why do all the signs say, bring them home now? Shouldn't they say, let my people go? Shouldn't they say, let my people go? It would make more sense. That's our call word. Let my people go, right? Okay? But it says, bring them home now. It took me until this week to understand even deeper that the Torah actually doesn't say, just let my people go. Rather, when God gives Moses his marching orders, God says, come therefore, I will send you to Pharaoh, and you, Moses, shall free my people. Moses had to take action to make the Israelites' freedom a reality. Moses had to leave his relatively comfortable life with a wife and 2 children, tending sheep, and he had to set out for a daunting and terrifying journey, a journey that he would face the possibility of his own death and the death of his family, because he was going to go up in front and face Pharaoh. If I were to use the statement, let my people go, or let our people go, I'm passing on responsibility for the freeing of hostages to Hamas. Let my people go. Please, Hamas, let my people go. But when I state machzirim otam habayta akshav, bring them home now, I'm stating that we, the Jewish people, must take responsibility for getting them home. And we'll not lay down our heads. We will not stop. We will not give up until every one of them is home. In the Hebrew, it's even more apparent, as it's in the plural, as if to say, we all, or you all, must bring them home, addressed to the leaders of Israel. Bring them home. You bring them home. Not let my people go, but you take action. Stand up and do something. Because we're not a people who wait for others. To be Jewish is to take a step into the unknown world, the scary world, to make hope a reality. That's what it means to be Jewish. That's what our Torah is saying without a line between Moses. It's saying there is not time, there is not place for us to put a line. We must act now. And so that sign will stay up there. And I will continue to ask you to take signs from the office and place them in your yards and speak to people. And I will ask us to not stop praying and singing and demanding until each one of them is home. Because their cry is too great to wait. Shabbat Shalom.